Everyone's going analog, and what better way to start your journaling journey than with a leather journal? I've had mentioned many times in my previous videos about buying a Paper Republic journal, making my own leather journal, and now that I've actually spent some time figuring out what materials to use and also the steps, I will be passing that along to you for those who also wants to create their own. I do also want to preface that this tutorial is specifically to make the bifold leather journal. This is similar to the Paper Republic Grand Voyager style. If you're looking to make a trifold leather journal similar to ones from Louise Carmen, creating that is actually very similar to the tutorial I'm about to show you to make a bifold. But along the way, I'll definitely note on specific steps that you might need to take for those who are looking to create a trifold leather journal. So without further ado, let me walk you through how to create your own. So to make your leather journal, you're going to need several materials. Starting off with the main material needed for this project, the leather. I specifically look for vegetable tanned leather, and I sourced mine from Leatherbox. They offer plenty of sizings, and they also have different thicknesses that you can choose from. For me, I would choose around the 3 to 4 millimeter thickness. That leather thickness and also leather type from Leatherbox seems to be the closest to the ones made from Paper Republic. If you want your leather to have that nice patina and age beautifully, I think sourcing it from Leatherbox through the Vachetta vegetable tan leather would be a great option. You will also be needing a leather hole puncher. Similar to the leather thickness, they also have a different size for how big you want your leather hole punch to be. And so I would recommend the 1.5 millimeter to 2.5 millimeter option. You will also be needing an elastic band or ribbon. Again, just so that it kind of maintains that same consistent sizing, I would go for around the 1.5 millimeter thickness. You will also be needing the notebooks and inserts you plan on fitting inside of your leather journal, an X-Acto knife, a ruler. Some other materials that is completely optional are a cutting mat. This is just so that your lines are straight and you're not cutting through whatever workspace you're working on. Grommets and a grommet tool, which I do not have because I don't plan on making those, but I know that it is popularly used in Louise Carmen journals. And finally, a burnishing gum and burnishing tool. This is actually something that I think would create a much more sophisticated feel just because it seals the leather edges and makes this nice clean finish. Once you've gathered all of your materials, you're ready to start creating it. So the very first step is to decide what size you want your leather journal to be. There are plenty of notebook sizes out there, ranging from A6 to A4 and B6 to B4. Depending on the sizes of your notebooks and also how many notebooks you want to fit inside, this is where I would kind of recommend looking through what inserts you plan on putting into your leather journal and determining what size leather you want to buy. So if you were to make an A6 journal, which is your typical pocket size, I would go for the smallest panel available through Leatherbox. And if you're going for an A5 sized journal, which is a typical notebook size, I would go for the second option panel. This is a bit bigger than the smallest panel that they offer. And if you want to make multiple journals using one leather piece, it is much more worth it to go for the shoulder size. For this project specifically, I will be making an A5 sized journal, and it's going to be a bifold. I know the trifold is also very popular. My friends created a trifold, and you can easily make a trifold journal as well using the same panel sizes that they offer. There would just be no cutting needed, especially for the smallest size if you're making an A6. You can just go ahead and use that single panel to create your trifold. Now you can go ahead and lay out one of the notebooks that you plan on inserting into your leather journal and trace out the sizing of that onto the leather panel. I would recommend leaving around 1 to 2 centimeter margins all across. The margins will be a determining factor of how many notebooks you can fit inside without the notebooks spilling out of the edges of your journal. And if you're cutting your journals, I would recommend going through with that X-Acto knife, slicing it over and over and over again rather than cutting it like steak. So now that you have your cut out leather, you're going to go ahead and measure the length of the leather. This is so that you could figure out the center of your leather. And once you find the center, go ahead and make a mark. And this is where you'll be folding the leather in half. You can go ahead and start measuring out the top and bottom holes to punch. This is where you'll be threading in your ribbons where you can attach your notebooks into. So from here, you're going to measure out 1 centimeter, and that is where your second hole will be. You're gonna do the same thing you just did on the top onto the bottom part as well. And then the first hole will be about 0.5 centimeters away from the second hole or the second dot that you just created. Once you've measured and marked down the holes, you can begin punching them out. What I would recommend is to place a cutting board underneath. This is just so that when you're punching your holes, you don't mess up your workspace. And you're gonna take that hole punch and something hard or heavy to kind of bang it into. And you're going to bang it just enough that you could take away the leather circle that's punched out. This part is also optional, but I'm going to take my burnishing gum tool, which has a sharp end, and I'm going to just quickly rim that around to smooth out the hole that I just created using the leather punch. And you're going to do that for every single mark that you created, and those will be the holes that you will be punching out. Now we could begin the stringing process. It's difficult for me to explain it verbally, so I'll just provide the visual stringing process. But you're going to take your elastic band ribbons and you're going to string like this. For the center hole, this one you're going to create a knot on an elastic ribbon and thread that through. Quick note when it comes to the elastic ribbons, no matter which ones you're threading into the hole, I would recommend going a little bit tighter or smaller than you might need. This is just to ensure that the leather notebooks stay in place, and obviously it is elastic, so you can go ahead and stretch them if needed. Because we punched 2 holes, one on the top and the bottom of that, this will fit 2 notebooks. If you ever want to include more notebooks into your leather journal, all you need to do is create the same threaded loop that you created for the center hole and thread that into the middle of whatever extra notebook you want to include and onto one of the existing notebooks into your leather journal. So the very last and optional step is sealing the edges with a burnishing gum. And if you were to ever burnish the edges of your leather, what you'll do is you'll take your finger or a brush and lightly coat the edges of the leather. You're going to apply a thin layer, wipe off any excess, and make sure that the burnishing gum doesn't touch the outer piece of the leather. If anything, if there's extra on the inside piece of the leather panel, that's okay, but once it's outside, it can stain the leather. You'll then take your burnishing tool and using a very rapid motion, just go back and forth on the area you've coated edge with burnishing gum. That friction and heat is what seals the gum onto the leather and creates this nice, sophisticated finish. You'll do this on all sides and you're done. And this is where you can place your notebooks, thread them through into the ribbons that you've created. And of course, you can always add more ribbons over the notebooks to include more notebooks if needed. And now you have your own leather journal. Making a trifold leather journal follows the exact same steps. The only difference is deciding where you'll be punching out your holes. So now I'll be sharing my journal ecosystem tour. I have been wanting to share this tour for so long, but I've been putting it off specifically so that I could include it into this video. I'm gonna start with the very first journal I created. This is my pocket size A6 leather journal. This is in the red and I've made this back in January, so it's been around 6 months and I fit 3 notebooks in here. The first notebook that I have is just random brain dump. I've been using this notebook ever since my first year of college and it is completely filled up. I just put it into this leather journal because sometimes I find myself referring back to this. The second journal is my to-do list. I'm a very type A person and I like to keep myself organized, so I make a to-do list almost every single day. And finally, this little notebook actually serves two functions. So the first half is where I keep my brain dump. Like I mentioned, the very first notebook that I had is my brain dump from the past and it's completely filled up. So now I use this newer one for my brain dump. If you can't tell already, the first thing that I wrote on my brain dump was the journal dimensions to create the leather journal. And then the second half of this notebook is my expense tracker. So that's what's in this smaller pocket-sized leather journal. And the one that I just created, this is the typical A5 sized leather journal. This is in the color Chianti. It's a bit like Venetia from Paper Republic. And in here I include 4 journals in total. The first notebook I have is this undated monthly planner. This is from Muji. And then this insert is my new journal. The third insert is my filled up personal diary / journal. So I needed to refill it. For these two, I usually write down my journal prompts for every single month, random lists that I have, my reading ratings, resolutions, a whole bunch of random things that I want to keep personal to me and not something I would rather show to anybody else. And then the last insert is from New York Public Library. I got this during one of their anniversaries and very fitting. I put all of my book thoughts inside. This is where I kind of just write out any quotes, anything that stood out, my opinions on each book, and things that I might want to mention whenever I share my monthly book thoughts onto YouTube. So that is what's in my larger sized leather journal. Making a leather journal is not a difficult process. All it takes is a little bit of research to find out what materials you like, the look of your leather journal, and the sizing as well. I think this makes a great gift or even like a friendly gathering activity. I actually made leather journals with my friends recently and we had a blast. This tutorial was long overdue, but I hope this was helpful. And I hope you also enjoy your new leather journal. Safe to say that I am thoroughly enjoying mine.